Before we begin, I just want to say that today's video discusses a real-life aviation disaster and survival story. There are references to injury and loss of life, and while I will handle this case respectfully, some details may be distressing for certain viewers. If this isn't the right video for you today, please take care of yourself, and I hope to see you in the next one. For those choosing to continue, thank you for being here. On Christmas Eve, 1971, a small commercial aircraft carrying 92 people flew over the Peruvian rainforest during a severe storm. Within minutes, the plane was struck by lightning and began to break apart mid-air. 17-year-old Juliane Koepcke was still strapped into her seat when she fell from the sky into the Amazon below. She survived. What followed was 11 days alone in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. This is the story of survival, resilience, and one of the most extraordinary aviation cases in history. Juliane Koepcke was born on the 10th of October, 1954 in Lima, Peru. Her parents were German scientists who had relocated to Peru to study wildlife and ecosystems within the Amazon rainforest. Her father, Hans Wilhelm Koepcke, was a zoologist, and her mother, Maria Koepcke, was an ornithologist. She has one brother named Stefan Koepcke. Juliana spent much of her childhood between Lima and a remote research station her parents established deep in the Panguana, was surrounded by dense jungle and accessible only by boat or small aircraft. Growing up in the environment meant Juliane was familiar with the terrain, wildlife, and basic survival principles from an early gap. She understood the dangers of the rainforest, including insects, river currents, and the importance of finding clean water. Although she attended school in Lima, her upbringing was far from typical. Time spent at the research station exposed her to scientific fieldwork and practical outdoor knowledge that would later prove critical. By December 1971, Juliane was 17 years old and preparing to return to the rainforest with her mother after finishing the school term. Neither of them could have anticipated what would happen next. On December 24th, 1971, just one day after she graduated, Juliane flew on LANSA Flight 508. Her mother, Maria, had wanted Juliane to return to Panguana with her on the 19th or 20th of December, but she wanted to attend her graduation ceremony in Lima on the 23rd of December. Maria agreed that they would stay for her graduation, and instead they scheduled a flight for Christmas Eve. All flights were fully booked, except for one with LANSA. Koepcke's father, Hans Wilhelm, urged his wife to avoid flying with the airline due to its poor reputation. Nonetheless, the flight was booked. The plane was struck by a lightning mid-flight and began to disintegrate before plummeting to the ground. Juliane found herself falling, still strapped to her row of seats, 3,000 meters, 10,000 feet, into the Amazon rainforest. After the lightning strike, the aircraft began to disintegrate in midair. Sections of the fuselage separated, and passengers were thrown from the cabin as the plane broke apart above the rainforest. Juliane, still strapped to her seat, was pulled into open air as the aircraft fragmented around her. She later recalled seeing the sky and the green canopy of the Amazon below as she fell. Still attached to a row of seats, she descended thousands of feet toward the forest. When she regained consciousness, she was lying on the rainforest floor. Against extraordinary odds, she had survived the fall. Around her, the dense jungle stretched in every direction. The aircraft was gone. The noise of the storm had passed. She was alone. Juliane survived the fall but suffered injuries including a broken collarbone, a deep cut on her right arm, an eye injury, a ruptured ligament in her knee, and a concussion. When Juliane regained consciousness, she was alone in dense rainforest. The crash site was silent, broken only by the sounds of insects and distant wildlife. Pieces of wreckage were scattered across the forest floor, but there was no immediate sign of other survivors. Despite her injuries, she was able to stand. Juliane understood that remaining in one place in the jungle could be dangerous. Drawing on knowledge from her childhood at her parents' research station, she began to think practically. One of the first priorities was water. She knew that following a small stream could eventually lead to a large river, and that rivers often mean signs of human activity. So she began walking, staying close to flowing water. For days she moved through thick vegetation, wading along the stream to avoid dense undergrowth and potential predators. She had very little food and survived mainly on small amounts of candy she had found in the wreckage. Insects were constant, and her injuries became increasingly uncomfortable in the humid environment. But she continued moving. Each step was deliberate. Each decision was based on what she had learned growing up in the rainforest. She later described focusing not on fear, but on the next practical action. And so, for 11 days, she walked. In the hours after LANSA Flight 508 disappeared from radar, search and rescue teams began attempting to locate the aircraft immediately. However, locating the aircraft in the Amazon rainforest proved incredibly challenging. The dense jungle canopy made it nearly impossible to see wreckage from the air, even when flying directly overhead. Rescue teams conducted aerial searches across the suspected crash area, but visibility was limited, and the storm conditions complicated efforts further. In the days that followed, officials began to assume there were no survivors. The vastness of the rainforest and the violent nature of the crash made the chances seem extremely low. Search crews focused on identifying debris fields and narrowing down where the aircraft had broken apart, but the thick vegetation concealed much of what lay below. Unbeknownst to those searching from above, Juliane was still alive, walking along a narrow stream deep within the jungle. As the official search efforts gradually scaled back, her survival depended entirely on her own knowledge and determination. On the 10th day of walking through the rainforest, Juliane came across a small boat tied along the edge of a river. Nearby was a simple wooden shelter used by local lumber workers. Though no one was there at the time, it was the first clear sign of human activity she had seen since the crash. Exhausted and severely weakened, she decided to wait. Later that day, 3 Peruvian lumbermen returned to the shelter and found her there. At first, they were cautious, unsure how a teenage girl had appeared alone in the jungle. Juliane explained that she had survived the plane crash. The men provided basic treatment for her injuries and transported her by boat to a nearby settlement. From there, she was taken by small aircraft to a hospital. It was then officially confirmed. Juliane Koepcke was the only survivor of LANSA Flight 508. In the days following Juliane's rescue, attention quickly turned to understanding what had happened to LANSA Flight 508. Search teams eventually located sections of the wreckage scattered across the rainforest. Investigators confirmed that Juliane was the sole among the 92 people on board. The official investigators later concluded that the aircraft had flown into a severe thunderstorm and was struck by lightning, which caused the plane to break apart at high altitude. The crash also renewed concerns about the safety record of LANSA, the airline operating the flight. In the years surrounding the disaster, the company had already been involved in several serious incidents, and the crash of Flight 508 brought increased scrutiny to its operations. For Juliane, however, the aftermath was deeply personal. Although she had survived, her mother had been among those who lost their lives in the crash. In the years following the crash, Juliane eventually moved to Germany with her father. Despite the trauma of the disaster, she chose to continue the scientific path that both of her parents had followed. Juliane studied biology at university and later specialized in mammalogy, the study of mammals. She would eventually return to Peru, continuing research connected to the Amazon rainforest, the same environment where she had once fought to survive. Over the years, Juliane has spoken publicly about her experience, contributing to documentaries and research surrounding aviation accidents and survival. As of today, she remains recognized as a sole survivor of LANSA Flight 508, and her story continues to be regarded as one of the most extraordinary survival cases in aviation history. The survival of Juliane Koepcke remains one of the most extraordinary stories in aviation history. Alone on the Amazon rainforest, injured and surrounded by an unfamiliar environment, she relied on the knowledge she had gained growing up in the jungle and the determination to keep moving forward. More than 50 years later, her story continues to stand as a reminder of human resilience and the strength people can find in the most difficult circumstances. If there are any other survival stories or real-life cases you would like to see explored, feel free to leave a suggestion in the comments. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay safe out there.